So today we're going to go over SAP Event Management and give it a good overview of what the functionality can do. I wrote the first book on event management in 2010 and I called it SAP's best kept secret because it truly is some fantastic functionality, but very few companies were using it back then. The second edition came along in 2016. I put a lot more functionality in there and some integration with SAP GTS, SAP Transportation Management. But even then, I called the second edition still SAP's best kept secret. Still, folks were not really adopting it wide scale. And really, I see the use in this type of functionality at every SAP implementation. Everybody wants visibility into their business processes. Everybody wants to manage their process by exception. Firstly, before we get going, a little bit about myself. My name is Kevin Wilson. If you need to get a hold of me, you can email me at kevin@erpgenie.com. Also, you can check out our website at www.erpgenie.com. LinkedIn, ERPGenie, Twitter, ERPGenie. All the details there. Please feel free to reach out to me. I've been in the game since 1996 in SAP and event management since 2008, so definitely qualified to talk a little bit about this topic. First of all, let's talk about SAP Event Management and how it came about. Back in '99, there was a movement in the supply chain industry called Supply Chain Event Management. They came up with the supply chain event management concept, and the idea was getting an understanding of all of the supply chain events that were outside of our control, right? So as a supply chain, we can only really control what's within our four walls, but we rely on partners, that being suppliers, customers, carriers, to give us information that they execute certain stages of the supply chain. These stages are events that occur within the supply chain, and we need visibility into those events in order to ensure that our supply chain is executed as efficiently as possible. If there's a bad event that occurs, we need to know, we need to communicate to our customer because something happened in the supply chain. Let's do that. So let's improve our customer service by telling our customers proactively that something has gone wrong or that we're going to delay the delivery and so forth. So first of all, if we take a look at what SAP talks about, the standard implementation of supply chain event management from an SAP perspective is the SAP Event Management module. And the purpose is used to monitor, adjust, analyze, notify around a business process. So when we talk about a monitor, we're able to have the visibility into a business process to see the status as it goes. From an adjust perspective, understand where something's gone wrong, right? So we have a plan, it's not executing towards that plan, so let's make an adjustment and see whether that adjustment is making sense. Analyze is exactly what I just said. So when you make an adjustment, let's analyze it and see whether it's making sense. See if there's an opportunity to improve the performance somewhere in the supply chain. Event management provides you the functionality and the data that's used to do that analysis. From a notification perspective, this is critical in terms of exception management and especially proactive exception management. So as soon as we find an exception, how do we notify the right person, that they need to take corrective action? As soon as we find an issue, how do we notify our customer that something's wrong and that we'd like to make it right or apologize and maybe reschedule and so forth? This is everything that SAP Event Management deals with. So two key pieces over here. We talk about exception management, process visibility. So exception management is when we find something wrong, how do we go about managing that? From a process visibility, how do we give this visibility to these statuses to our customer and to our suppliers? Okay. If we move on to the next one, like how long has event management been here? Well, the timeline for the release of event management dates all the way back to 2001. In fact, it actually goes, all the way back to 1999 when the very first version was dealt with customer specific, but they started to release it to that customer in 2001. That was EM Release 1. In 2004, we talk about Release 4.1, which is the official release. So we're talking about 14, 15 years ago where event management was released. Okay. In 2008, we had quite a big upgrade to the new WebDyn Pro version of it. The older web communication layer was in 4.1, sort of a Java application, didn't look too good, wasn't too flexible. But in 2008, they came out with a much more rigid web UI to access the event management data. In 2009, we released 7.0, and out there came the EPCIS compliant. So Electronic Product Code Information Services is what EPCIS stands for. And that started to get event management in the ability to track and trace serialized products, serialized containers, serialized goods. EPCIS is the standard for tracking and transmitting transaction information around serialized items. 2011 saw a big jump from Enhancement Pack 1. It allowed sort of the higher volume transactions, because now we were starting to get some of the pharmaceutical companies using this, and we needed higher volumes allowed through the event management from an event perspective and an event handler perspective, and also some serious transportation management integration. And really you can see from 2011 onwards, we're now focusing event management tightly integrated with transportation management. And in 2013, when 9.0 came along, we got a new web UI again. This is the floor plane manager architecture that it's leveraging, as well as geo-tracking. So we've got maps that we can be able to see exactly where the events are occurring. Smart business for event management. So now we're talking about HANA Analytics that is also integrated with event management. So this is sort of when it became, kind of cool, cool functionality. And in 2015, they gave us some web services functionality, which allowed us to connect into the Fiori app. So they gave us some templates on how to connect Fiori into that and the web services around that. And again, some more transportation management functionality. If I move on to the components of event management, so what's provided to us when we get event management and we install it on our servers? Well, there's a couple of key pieces. The first thing, on the SAP Business Suite server, so ECC, SCEM, APO, GTS, Transportation Management, those would be the Business Suite type functionality servers, if you will. We get as a basis plugin what we call the application interface, and it allows us to configure the API interface with event management. So in there we can actually, just through configuration, determine what data needs to go to event management from an event perspective, and what objects we'd like to track within event management from a process status visibility perspective. All right, so each one of those applications are delivered as part of the basis plugin. CRM is not one of the ones that is covered by this, but you can still use the API natively. So in a user exit, you just call the API, the BAPI, exclusively, whereas in ECC you would configure and do it using some of the standard functionality around the application interface. The second piece, and obviously where all the functionality sits, is on the EM server itself. So in the EM server, we've got the BAPIs that allow us to create events and create trackable processes on that system. It also has a rule engine that allows us to analyze the events come in, check them against the plan for those events, and then react accordingly, whether we need to trigger on a workflow, send an email, adjust the status, adjust something back on the application server, whatever it is, the rule engine takes care of that. The web UI, I spoke about the floor plan manager, the web DIN profile floor plan manager, or Fiori, that also comes on top of the event management server, and that's one of the key pieces. Very configurable functionality, so you can decide what selection options you have, what list view you want, what's the detail view, and everything comes role based. So based on the role, I get to see the sets of information I get to select on this type of data. And then if you're another role like a customer, maybe you have a different set of selection criteria and certainly a different display view into it. The third component I'd like to talk about is the BW extension, tight integration with BW. So as your events come and the data changes within event management, we may want to send some of that data through to BW so that an analytics can happen over there. So tight integration with event management. Understand now the difference on event management. We've got the web UI, that is really for operational live process reporting, right? So how's my status of my process object right now, right? How's my sales order doing? How's my purchase order doing? How's my delivery doing? From a BW perspective, we need to be looking more backwards in things. So I say, if I analyze the business process from a how did all my purchase orders do? So from a historical perspective, I can have a look back and say, how well did I perform? That's where you should be doing your BW reporting and your analytics reporting. Even from a HANA analytics perspective, push it out there and understand where are the opportunities to improve in our business process. And then the last thing that integrates with event management is obviously, how do I get my events in? So my event senders, right? So my event senders can be that application interface, but it can also be a third-party system. It can also be a mobile device, a tablet, a sensor, whatever information you need to actually trigger coming from your supply chain, whether that is a container that you need to track, whether a carrier needs to tell you that it's left the port, whether a carrier needs to tell you that it's arrived from proof of delivery, whether a vendor needs to tell you it's shipped. All of that information needs to come into event management so we can analyze it and see whether we need to address things going forward. Business process type is a concept within event management, and it just basically highlights the higher level version of what processes come standard with event management. So in ECC, as an example, we've got equipment master, the inspection lot, notifications, deliveries, FI documents, invoices, purchase orders, purchase recs, sales orders, invoices, custom invoices, shipments, work orders. So you can almost see outside of the HR and master data areas, almost all of the major business processes are covered within event management. So that allows us to easily extract events and easily extract process and status around those components within SAP R3. From a global trade services perspective, we can cover both the export and import documents. OER, ARI. OER stands for Object Event Repository, and ARI is the Auto ID infrastructure. There's two scenarios that we cover there. Product tracking and authentication, so that's my EPCIS compliance, so that's my track and trace for serialized products covered in that scenario. And ARI, those generic objects from an ARI perspective. From an SNC, Supplier Network Collaboration, seems to be going away a little bit in the future, but we do have some integration with event management from the purchase order and replenishment order there. Transportation management, big integration with that, and it's ongoing, right? So most of the objects within transportation management are covered: instructions, resources, shipments, transportation units, booking orders, freight units, everything is in there. And then from an APO, a replenishment order perspective, that's also covered. So if I look into the next section, we want to understand a little bit more about events, because since we are an event management shop, let's go see it a little bit, have an understanding of what events are within event management context. So here's a detailed diagram. There's basically 4 aspects of an event that is covered by event management. But in order to discuss those, we'll talk about the 2 types of events that we have. We have actual events and we have planned events, right? So planned events are when we look at a business process and lay it out, these are the events that should occur, right? And then when you execute that business process, these are the events that actually occur. So actual events and planned events. So with that in mind, let's look at these 4 things. A regular event is any event that occurs within the planned window for when that event should occur, right? We typically don't have a point in time when we say that's when the event should occur. So from a planned perspective, we give someone an hour or a day or even more than a day to execute that particular event. Well, that's the planned window for execution. And if the event occurs within that planned event, then excellent. That's a regular event. The next 2 swim lanes over there is when we look at that planned window and something occurs before or after that event. It's either early or late, and we need to take corrective action if we see the need to do so. An unreported event is something that we don't have a plan for, right? So there's a delay in a shipment. We don't plan to have a delay, but if a delay happens, we need to still address it, right? So that is something that event management will deal with. Another key aspect for this, the last one, is an unreported aspect, unreported event. When the plan window comes and goes, and no event is reported, then we need to kick into action and send a corrective action status to someone, or workflow, or an email or a text to say you need to come and fix this particular order up. Let's take a look at event terminology. Again, if it's event management, everything that deals with coming into event management is an event, right? So an event typically deals with a status change, right? It's a delivery's being created, a delivery's being picked, a delivery's being packed, a delivery's being issued, it's been delivered to the customer, or it's been picked up. It's a status change, right? And we have an external customer, external code. So if we're dealing with third parties in our supply chain, they send me an event, and in the internal side within event management, I have a different meaning for that particular event, or a different code for that, and I want to map the external one into the internal one. So that's what we talk about in event code and the event code group. From a tracking ID, when we look at that from a perspective of an event, it's what process does this status apply to. So a tracking ID would be delivery, right? So a delivery is postcodes issued, a delivery is picked, a delivery is packed, a delivery is delivered. Okay, but if I'm talking about a sales order is complete. I could also have a tracking ID of the line item, right? The sales order is incomplete at line item 10. So now my tracking ID relates to the sales order line item, right? And the tracking ID is used to determine against which event handler or business process we need to post that event against. A couple of key points around events. It's not just the date and time that we're dealing with. We also need to be cognizant of the location that the event occurred, or the location that it is planned to be, occur. And again, we can check between the difference between the two. If there is a difference between the actual and the planned, again, that's an exception. All right. We also have who took action on that particular event. So the partner that's involved. Again, there's a plan. We want FedEx to take the shipment to our customer, but UPS took it, as an actual. So that's again an issue on that side. And then we got our dates. So we've got the event date, when the event was actually reported, and then when it was actually processed. All right, so these are some things that we could use from a KPI perspective. How well is our performance running for this particular process? We talk about a sender and receiver. Okay, so who sent me the event, and then who's receiving the event. All right, these could differ, and we can basically report on these ones. What is the reason for the event, right? So if we get a delay event, tell me what the reason was. Why was it? Was it a weather? Was it a traffic incident that we had the delay? Did the customer refuse pickup? What was the reason? Okay. Measurements. So we can actually send measurements with each event. And a measurement could be a weight of a product or the temperature of the product, especially in the cold chain process. We need to make sure that our temperature of our product remains within a certain range as it goes through the supply chain, and we're able to measure that as we get the different temperatures, the events. We get the temperatures for the different ones. We can check it to see whether it's actually meeting what the requirements are from a plan perspective. If it goes outside of that tolerance, let's count it. And in one instance, we even had a customer that wanted to check how long it was remaining outside of that particular tolerance. And for each serialized object, we need to basically add a budget for how much time it could actually spend outside of that tolerance. And event management's the perfect tool to actually measure that and keep that in track and keep that counter going. Whenever it's out of the tolerance, start to add. When it's back in tolerance, stop the adding, and you just keep that counter going. A data code set is another idea. Where's the data coming from, right? So if I need to come from ECC, is there a specific or a third-party system? Is there something there that I need to track from an event perspective? Where did this data come from? And you can also send that in an event. So as you can see, it's quite comprehensive in terms of the functionality that is actually passed from an event perspective. Okay, events and messages. This is an incredibly important topic on event management, and a very overlooked topic in folks, especially the clients that I go to, don't understand the concept of events versus the message. An event tells me all the data around when the actual event physically occurred, right? Who did it, where did it occur, when did it occur, and all of that information. The message is the electronic message that tells me about what actually happened. And that's a different set of data, right? It's a different set of dates completely, right? It doesn't have a partner or a location or anything like that. It's just date and time dependent. And it's critical because if I don't know about the information or the event that occurred in my supply chain, I can't react to it. So it's very important for me to get the message telling me about the event as soon as possible. So you should hold your partners accountable for sending you the information in a timely fashion. So put restrictions, put it in their contract in terms of my KPI, my service level agreement for you is 1 hour after the event, I need to get that message. All right. Event management is that tool that will actually measure compliance to that KPI. Right. If you talk about EDI, I'm going to send you a PO. I want that PO acknowledgement back within a day. I'm going to get the PO acknowledgement, but I'm going to give them a day for the message to come back. Right? If I don't get it within a day, then I can react to that. I can send it to BW, I can report on it there, and I can measure the compliance for that particular supplier on or purchase order acknowledgement sending back. All right. If they send me an advanced ship notice, an ASN, telling me that they shipped the product 3 days ago, so I've already got the product. Well, what good is that? All right. So we need to get that timely. Right. So the message allows me to actually go and monitor my supplier and my customer, my carrier, any of my third-party systems to make sure that I'm getting that event on time, because there is a lag between when the event actually occurs and when it actually sends me the event message. Very important. I do have a separate tutorial on that. Just have a look. I think it's tutorial number 2, so go and have a look at that one. It goes through this in a little bit more detail. Let's talk about enabler for management by exception. So we have event management that can look at the plan and look at the execution against that plan and determine whether things are going not according to that plan. So if I look at an early or late events, we described this a little earlier. So when it actually occurred, then I get my message, right? So if you look at the diagram over here, we're talking about when I'm actually getting that message. So it's point 4 on the timeline over there. As long as it occurs between 2A and 2B, it's going to be on time, right? But that's the message coming on time, right? But in 4, it's going to tell me about when 1A and 1B, any time between that time window. And if it's early, so in other words, if it occurred at time 3A, so the message told me that the event occurred at 3A, it's early. And if their message occurred when it's 3B, then it's late. Then I need to react to that. So SAP has this rule set that looks at this event and says, when was I planned to occur? All right, so I was planned to occur between 1A and 1B, and the time that they gave me was 3A. In other words, it was early. I'm going to have a look at that, and now I'm going to determine, should I send someone a notification that this happened? Should I adjust the status to say this was early? If I want to send someone, like maybe a customer service rep, an email, an alert, or a workflow, they could potentially go and see whether this had an impact on the customer or not, if this was a customer-facing event. And then that allows them to go and make a proactive call to them, if you will. If it's late, so we were supposed to deliver to the customer at 2 o'clock, again, let's send a workflow, let's send an email, let's send a text to the customer service rep so that they maybe make a follow-up call with that customer to apologize for our tardiness, and we'll see what we can do to make it right. Okay. A concept down at the bottom I want to introduce. We've got 3 times that we're going to be dealing with here and that event management manages for us. Time to insight, time to action, and time to resolve. So time to insight is the time between when something goes wrong in the supply chain or when something happens and when I actually know about it. Right? And the idea is obviously to collapse that, right? So that as quickly as I know about an issue, I can then go and address it, right? This is why the message is important, because the message is my time to insight event, right? That's when it tells me about when my event went wrong. Okay, in my next slide, I'm going to deal with what the other two are. Well, a slide from now. So if I look at my overdue planned event, so this is an event that was planned to happen between 1A and 1B, and I was planning on getting the message telling me about that event between 2A and 2B. But now that time has come and gone. Okay, so now I need to react to it. So event management has an overdue monitor. It looks at all of these planned events to see which ones haven't occurred and yet they should have occurred. And as soon as that happens, I need to take action, right? So we can't solve all of them, but maybe we get the opportunity to take corrective action, but at least set things right with whoever potential customers are. So again, let's send an email, let's send an alert, let's create a workflow, let's get things going in the right direction. Again, this one's dealing with time to insight. When something goes wrong, as soon as I know, it should have happened by now, but it hasn't, let me go and fix that one. So now we talk about, I'm just taking workflow, for example, and the same could be done for the alert framework, for example, which is tightly integrated with event management. But with event management, it's standard functionality, it's configurable. I can raise an event in ECC, which would trigger a workflow and have that item addressed back in the sending system. When we look at our three times, so time to insight, time to action, time to resolve, by triggering these things automatically, we start to address my time to action. So now I have had my time to insight, which is event management, and then event management triggering a workflow. So in other words, my time to action is now being collapsed. So as soon as I have insight, I'm triggering action in the system that we need to against the agent that needs to take action against that particular item. All right. When they get that, now it's up to the agent to look at the inbox, for example. Now it's just the time to resolve. So now that they have all the information in front of them in terms of this was what was wrong, these are the business objects that are involved, go fix it. Time to resolve is more of a manual effort, and it gets resolved, and then event management can be updated from a status perspective. But the first two pieces, very much important to collapse those as quickly as possible. Tell me when the issue happened, time to insight, take corrective action as quickly as possible, so time to action. Okay, and SAP Event Management, tightly integrated with workflow, accomplishes that. From an event management perspective, we're an enabler to providing end-to-end business process visibility. And there's three types of visibility here that I need to talk with you about. The first thing is process visibility. So as a frequent user within the SAP, you'd want to use the SAP Event Management Web UI, so the floor plan manager, the Web DIN Pro that we're talking about. So there's an example of the screen on the right-hand side. Now it's important to understand that this is user and role based. Okay, so depending on my role, I get to see the reports that I'm allowed to see. I can get the selection criteria that I'm allowed to see, and I get all the fields that I'm allowed to see. If I'm not allowed to see dollar values, I won't see dollar values. If I'm not allowed to see quantities, I won't see quantities. If I'm not allowed to see certain statuses, I won't see certain statuses. All right. Even a customer can potentially log into your web UI, and you can show them a certain set of statuses, and they can have a look at their orders. Okay. From a third-party perspective, if you want to just tie in from your own system, if you've got Adobe Flex, you can write your own little custom UI. Web application, you just call a BAPI to get the data, and you provide that to your external users. The third process visibility, we're talking about the occasional users. So here we're talking about maybe leveraging SAP Fiori. All right, so have the Fiori app. It's less functional unless you want to put a lot of effort into developing stuff around Fiori, which is fine. It's becoming more and more mainstream, more and more frequent user, but right now still I would say more with the occasional user. Absolutely go that, especially if they're mobile users, get them on Fiori as quickly as possible. The next set of visibility is exception visibility. So now that I have an exception, what should I use to look at it? Well, I say you need to leverage what the company is already using. Right, this is not event management. You don't deliver too many of the exceptions through event management, although you can list all the exceptions if they're adjusting the status too, so you can have a look at the status, and these are all my ones in exception. But to address an individual exception, and if your company leverages workflow, then use workflow. Okay, if you're using the alert framework, then use the alert framework. If you want to get it in email, send it in email. That's where you need to do it. So a frequent user, I would say use SAP Workflow. That's where you want to go and address the exceptions. KPI visibility, leverage either Smart Business, so SAP Event Management for Smart Business in HANA, or you can use SAP BW to have a look at those. Tight integration with those, no problems. That's where you get your reporting, your graphing, your trending, get it all out of those two systems. A couple more slides over here. So from a use case perspective, there's basically four things I want to talk about. Process track and trace. If I'm calling it process track and trace, most of the folks think track and trace, just product track and trace, carton, parcel, container track and trace. I'm looking at a process track and trace. So the top left-hand one over there, if we talk about WEMA, where is my order? From a sales customer-facing perspective, order to cash, we've got a sales order, then goes through fulfillment, whether it's dropship, warehouse, make to order, doesn't really matter, all the way through to the customer and delivery and then invoicing. We want to track that process, right? So if you're getting inbound calls today that asks, where is my order? What is the status of my order? You should be listening. This is a key piece of functionality where we use event management and allows us from a customer sales rep perspective to give them a customer that answer directly. So if someone calls, here's the last 10 orders for you, here's the status of each one of those. You can be proactive against discussing what the status of that order is with the customer. Or better still, why not provide that information to them on your web? All right, give them the ability to log in and have a look at their status, much like Amazon does, right? It's exactly the same. Have a look at the status, so you don't get that inbound call. Have them log in on the mobile app or on the web and get that. That information is easily available and retrievable from event management. From a purchasing side of, procurement side of things, so now we're talking about placing an order with a supplier. How am I sure that that product is coming in on time, and from a warehouse perspective, I'm going to receive it. How do I know that I'm going to, what do I need to receive today, and am I going to get all my product on time? So I've labeled this one WIMPO. So where is my purchase order? Okay, this is the same as the customer order to cash side of things, just flipped completely the other way around, right? So it's very important that we get the inbound product on time, and this is the functionality that we need to in order to track that. And it goes heavily in conjunction with procurement-related EDI, right? So we need to get that messaging in from our supplier as soon as possible so we can see whether there's any issues and address them. At a later tutorial, I'll actually run through that inbound PO, EDI, and how it relates to event management and how you can actually leverage those two techniques to get some really good functionality going so that you can keep on top of your supply chain. Another common use is that container tracking, right? So from an outbound and inbound visibility perspective, outbound containers to our customers or to third parties, and inbound, to us. From a whole transportation perspective, are we doing well? With each container, is something held at customs? Is there something that we're out for delivery? Do we need the proof of pickup? Has it been delivered? All of that functionality. Anything's wrong, customer refused the delivery, let's find that information and make sure it bubbles up and any exceptions are passed on to the correct people to take corrective action. The last one is your traditional track and trace, so parcel tracking. So if we talk about postal companies, so Canada Post, Australia Post, all of these folks, China Post, are using event management to track their parcels. And it's the same, if we send out small parcels to someone, we also want to give that status to our customer. So tied up with this, each outbound shipment of that parcel, tied back to delivery, handling unit, sales order, we're back to where is my order? right? If there's multiple parcels, we'll have multiple statuses, and we can relate that back to the sales order and give our customer a good sense of service by tying those two processes together. So these are the 4 areas we heavily use in event management, and everybody, if you're in business, typically is using these kind of this kind of functionality. A quick look at some of the successful SAP event management customers as according to SAP. I've done a few of these over here, but we've got quite a lot of different diverse organizations. We've got the railways in Canadian Pacific. We've got big organizations, Siemens, Nike from an AFS perspective, BNSF is another railway. We've got Microsoft, Insight Enterprises, BAT, British American Tobacco, Serialized Products, Stanley Black & Decker, International Paper, Canada Post, there we go. So quite a lot of use of it. Delaval is the German company. You'll see some another video on my channel from the head of their event management solution, talking about how well they managed to leverage event management in their milk industry. Okay, that's it for now. I want to thank you for your time. Once again, if you need to get hold of me, Kevin at ERPGenie.com, feel free to subscribe at our YouTube channel. Like that, reach me at ERPGenie at either LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you. Until next time, goodbye.